he directly killed the scout with one knife. Then he crossed out a name on his notebook. He crossed out a kill target. From their conversation, we know that they were here to loot the equipment of other guilds. At this moment, everyone received a system message. The system message that the orc chief was killed. Yes, Euron had successfully defeated him. He also obtained a catalog called Deadpool's Book. It can store 5 undead monsters at any time. From now on, after entering the dungeon, he can immediately summon skeletons. And with Euron activating the catalog, the skeletons of the orc chief who just lost his body were really turned into a black gas and entered the book. On the other hand, the people of the skeleton guild, after learning that the chief had been killed, decided to go and kill Yuan to seize the boss equipment he obtained. It seems that the skeleton guild had done their homework when they came in. Only one person was left to deal with Shang Hu, but he didn't notice that. Yuan was already following him from behind. The second thing the man did after rebirth, he took out a long knife and strangled all his teammates. After the other party took off his disguise, the skeleton guild realized that the people who attacked them were not from their guild. It turned out that after Yuran tracked the survivor, he killed him. He also learned through peeping at his memory. The culprit that led to less than half of the survivors was these people from the skeleton guild. However, in Yuran's guess, he also thought that the miser guild might have a special contract with these people. While talking, Yuan changed into the clothes of the skeleton guild. Then he said the words to strangle those scumbags. But when he wanted to get some clues from them, the people of the skeleton guild did not hesitate and committed suicide by cutting their stomachs. For Yuan, it was just a superfluous move. Then he activated Anubis. From this person's memory, Yuan saw the Messier guilds Shengong and Jiansheng. It seems that Zhang Tian really has a secret cooperation. And he also learned that these people have a task that has not been completed, is to kill the middleman who runs the dungeon business. At this moment, Wu Kan is so angry that his lungs are about to explode. He really trusted the people of the Miser Guild too much, even though he was a little skeptical at first. Whether it's the Sword Saint or the Divine Skill, once were Yuran's mentors in weapon usage. But now he found out that they were the same kind of people as Zhang Qian. But since the truth has been somewhat understood, Yuran vowed he would never let these guys succeed easily. But for this middleman, he is very curious. He must find time to meet him. After all, being on the assassination list, he must be a remarkable person in terms of strength and authority. Moreover, this operation failed. They will definitely continue to assassinate. Maybe if he can save Wu Chan this time, he might get a good opportunity. Then he left the dungeon. But in order not to attract attention, he even deliberately gave himself a few knife wounds. Soon, news reports about the dungeon also came out. Yuran successfully reversed the tragic situation of his past life. Since the rewards for this clearance were all missing, after coming out, some guilds immediately had physical conflicts. Of course, Li Rongwan was also very angry. For this crusade, he spent a lot of money. But his men came back empty-handed. After teaching these useless things a lesson, Li Rongwan went to the hospital to question Yuran. But next, Yuran had made up everything in advance. He told Li Rongwan he saw with his own eyes the Skull Union's people killed the orc chief and deliberately attacked others to steal equipment. But the report said that none of the Skull Guild survived. That means The clearance reward was probably taken by some force. Saying that, Yu Ran said that he also escaped by luck. The other side had the stealth skill of the silent hunter. His strength alone was no match for them. Fortunately, after listening, Li Longwan didn't doubt or ask too much. The thing he entrusted to Yu Ran before, that is, to monitor other guilds that entered the dungeon together, now he suffered heavy losses due to the skeleton guild, and the reward was also strangely missing. So Li Longwan decided to investigate. He needs to know who reaps the benefits. However, considering that Yuan did a perfect job, Li Longwan decided to fulfill one of his requests. Yuan said without hesitation that he wanted to find someone. Who was the person the Japanese wanted to kill, Wu Kan? Although Li Longwan didn't know how Yu Ran knew him, he still reminded him that he would call later. And left the ward. A few days later, when Yu Ran was discharged, he immediately received a call from Wu Kan. But before they actually met, Wu Kan asked Yu Ran to pass his test. And this test was to destroy a sea-level dungeon. But this was not difficult for Yu Ran at all. He only took half a day to clear it alone. According to the agreement, Yuan passed Wu Kan's test. Then they could reach a cooperation. The next day, Yuan bought a dungeon from Wu Kan. But at this moment, Li Longwan suddenly summoned Yu Ran for something. Every day, the man draws a scar on his arm, because each one represents the people who died at his hands. However, the people he killed were never his enemies. But the employer paid him to do it. So, in order to avenge his dead teammates, Li Longwan found this person. It turned out that the men who had returned empty-handed before to please the boss, he actually ran through multiple level 1 dungeons overnight. But the next day, he received the bad news that they all died in battle. Li Longwan naturally didn't believe it. With their strength, they couldn't beat the first-level monsters. During the subsequent investigation, one of Li Longwan's men accidentally discovered that, in the dungeon where several of them died, there were others. These people belonged to the Skeleton Guild. To investigate clearly, Li Longwan decided to set a trap. Let his men meet those people. But the other party seemed to be no ordinary people. So, he decided to ask Zheng Yong to act as his bodyguard. As soon as Li Longwan left, the people from the Miser Guild found Zheng Yong, asking what conspiracy Li Longwan had with him. Naturally, all information about the employer must be kept secret, which is the duty of a mercenary. But the people from the Miser Guild offered too much. Zheng Yong told them everything truthfully. He said that Li Longwan wanted him to protect someone, and his name is Yuan. The people from the Miser Guild immediately took out their phones. They found Yuan also participated in that Leijiaji dungeon, but the protection for him was so much trouble, made the members of the Miser Guild suspicious. So they decided to entrust Zheng Yong to capture the person Li Longwan wanted to protect. The next day, Li Longwan found Yu Ran, hoping that he could be a bait to lure out the people who killed his guild. After hearing that, began to stutter. But it was all an act. All to get more money from Li Longwan. Eventually, both sides reached an agreement. Li Longwan offered a high reward, and Yu Ran was used as bait. Entered the dungeon. He joined Zheng Yong and others as his bodyguards. When they entered the dungeon, among the Skull Guild members, there were people from the Miser Guild last night. On the contrary, Yu Ran was accompanied by a bodyguard. As for Zheng Yong, he pretended to lead the others to survey the surroundings. After all, he couldn't show his feet in front of Yu Ran. But just 2.5 minutes after Zhang Yang left, his right eyelid kept twitching. He felt that something unlucky might happen. So they decided to go back to find Yuran. But as soon as they found him, they found that his men and Yuran were both lying in a pool of blood. The therapist immediately started treatment. But because the subordinate had a major artery bleeding, he had already missed the best time for rescue. Just as Zhang Yang wanted to check on Yuran, behind the therapist, a skeleton soldier suddenly appeared and then was slashed in half. Zhang Yang immediately, he thought of the client of the Niger Guild. But before he suspected, for 2.5 seconds, the fisherman lying on the ground suddenly came to life. Except Zhang Yang, who was still breathing. All the others were killed. How did you know that? On a certain day in 2024, a large number of underground cities suddenly emerged when the human world was heavily damaged. Humans also awakened a special power called omnipotence. I thought these chosen people would save the world, but they were afraid of their own selfish desires, began to usurp national power wantonly. The world began a major reshuffle, and the male lead Yuren is also one of the victims of this incident. When he faced the last dungeon, Yuren was betrayed by his closest comrades. Because as long as the farce is over, the world would immediately return to peace. The power accumulated over the years will disappear with it. Ordinary people have no reason to continue to obey orders. The so-called burden of heroes is just a tool for them to give orders, as the hero who wanted to save the world the most no longer qualified to continue living. At this moment, he finally understood he was nothing but a tool for traitors, as a tool to realize his ambition. He began to roar hysterically. Zhang Qian told me, all of this is not real. Originally, Zhang Qian was Yuran's most trusted friend. When he had no hope for the world, it was Zhang Qian's belief, who was abandoned by his parents, to regain his desire for life. I will end all the dungeons to bring peace to the world. But what Yuran never expected was the only trustworthy friend turned out to be the one who killed him. But when Yuran opened his eyes again, he found that he came to a time period before he got omnipotence. Looking at his unpierced body, he thought it was a dying illusion after death. But in the next second, the vehicle Yuran was in suddenly braked sharply, and everyone jumped out with weapons. Following the position where Yuran aimed his gun, he realized that a large number of orcs attacking the city appeared ahead. So he didn't hesitate. He picked up an AK-47 and started shooting. He easily killed all the enemies in his way. But from the feel of shooting and flexible body movements, Yuran realized that he was not in an illusion at all. And the only thing that could explain the current situation was that he was reborn. But because of Yuran's private action, he was scolded by the leading officer. Are you out of your mind? You almost killed us. Hearing this, Yuran was not moved at all and continued walking forward. Having experienced the betrayal of his comrades in the previous life, how could he still care about the safety of other people's lives? At this moment, Yuan heard a familiar voice, and what appeared in front of him was the system panel of choosing Shangguang to become an awakener. But compared to his previous life, there was an extra option. Looking at the information introduction of Dark Apostle, he immediately remembered the powerful man known as the King of Deadpool. He can not only use various curses and poisons, but also can summon an undead army to serve him. But this was all because the Dark Apostle was different. Only one person is often chosen by the familiar. This also means that the chosen person will have all the powers in the light. So Yuan decisively chose the Dark Apostle because in his previous life, when he and Jiang Tian fought against the King of Deadpools, he had thoroughly analyzed all the powers of the opponent. So he wanted to rely on this experience to become the next King of Deadpool. Then, he wanted to tear apart all his comrades who betrayed him. Finally, Yuan came to the Firebird Mansion with the worst reputation. As a group that often appears to be stabbed and profit-driven, this is definitely the best place for him.